Hi, I'm Dr. Bertice Berry, and I need to tell you a story. Many of you know that I am a religious and spiritual person. I attend the Episcopal Church. It took me years to go to a church. In fact, Celia Dunn, the woman who invited me to church, had invited me every time she saw me for about 5 years. And it finally was like, let me just go so she can stop asking me. Anyway, prior to that, I probably had been out of church for maybe 10 years, almost 10 years. I was at a church in California when I lived there for about 10 years and was really dedicated and very committed to working in that church. And then found that things were not as they seemed. The leadership was involved in some things that were just really wrong. And it was very painful to come to this awareness. It was extremely painful. Now, when I went to church there, I had been out of church for a while. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, and when I went away to college and graduate school, I needed something that was much more inclusive and that had a different level of role for the role of women and, the respect for women. My local church in Wilmington was wonderful, but the national church, the Stand, was not one that I could continue to adhere to. So, finding that church in California was important to me and important for my children. My children had begun to question things, and I wanted them to be able to have a spiritual foundation that if they got older, when they got older, if they wanted to choose differently, they could. But at least they had some kind of a foundation because I had had one. So when the whole thing happened, it was extremely painful. It was horrible. And I left church vowing to never go again. There are times when people will make those comments here, and every time I see that, I begin to pray and send love because I truly understand. I never pray that people come back to church. I pray that they find the peace that they need. Sometimes, if you try to explain to people the why or the what about it, and I rarely do, I don't even like to talk about it, it brings up too much. It's necessary to talk about, but the lack of understanding makes it painful to talk about. People will often say, oh, that was a church hurt. And the problem is, people are always looking at the man and they're not looking at God. Well, that's just blaming the victim. There is a term that I think applies much better. And is a term that is used for people in the military who've suffered from PTSD, which is another one of those terms that I think is overused and misused. Like somebody had a bad olive and now they have PTSD towards olives. Moral injury is this term that I learned not too long ago in the study of moral injuries for people who've served in the military and suffer from PTSD. Very often there is a soul wound. They have to do something that is contrary to their nature. They have to kill someone. They have to do something that just goes against who they are. And I think the term moral injury applies to people who have experienced the abuse of church and religion, because at their soul, they have been injured at their very core of their being. These are people who are dedicated, who are sold out, who are committed to the work. They have brought others, they have shared it. There's a sense of guilt for, proclaiming the goodness of this community that you're a part of. And then there's the pain of the brokenness and disconnection from a community that you were very much a part of. I am very grateful that I have been able to find my way back into a religious community because it was not easy to do. It was very difficult to even walk into a church. Our church has a history that is steeped in beauty and horror. There's greatness about it, there's horror about it, but it is pointed towards Christ. It is pointed towards justice and mercy and love. It is striving to be Christ-like. It is incredibly inclusive. It is welcoming, and you find a sense of belonging. But not everybody will be ready or prepared to go towards that. So if you have never experienced that kind of a moral injury, I am so grateful that you have not. But please don't try to give judgment to those who have. You can't understand. And when you judge it, you are heaping coals on an injury. You are pouring salt in an open wound. So many of you have said that you are grateful for the stories here and even grateful for my religiousness and spirituality. But understand that I love you and that every single day there is a space in my heart where I'm praying for your peace and for the ability to shed any guilt or shame that you may carry around that horrible, horrible injury. And please know that you are loved. I love you.